I always thought I knew patience. I always thought I could trust, I could believe in someone's promises. But the truth is, patience is only as valuable as the reason you have for it, and trust? Trust can be weaponized against you in ways you never imagine. Every day at work, I wore a mask. A smile that seemed innocent, polite, even warm. But behind it, a storm was brewing. Every laugh, every nod, every carefully casual conversation was a calculated move. I remember the first day it all went wrong. The day I realized the person I loved wasn't worth a second of loyalty. The betrayal had been subtle, almost invisible at first. A misdirected glance, a secret message that I wasn't supposed to see, the kind of slip that makes your chest tighten before your mind screams at you to run. I didn't. I stayed. Because I knew something they didn't. So I smiled. And I smiled some more. Every smile was a promise to myself. Every polite gesture, every yes to their demands, every friendly chat by the coffee machine was a step in my silent war. They thought they were in control. They thought they had me figured out. They had no idea that the real game had just begun, and that I, Sage, had been writing the rules all along. The office never looked so bright, never smelled so clean, never seemed so dangerous. Every step I took, every plan I laid was calculated. I wasn't just surviving in the shadows of their lies, I was preparing to strike. And when the time came, they wouldn't even see it coming. Because in the end, patience is power. And I had 20 months of careful, silent plotting ready to erupt in a storm they would never forget. That I never thought of myself as dangerous. At least, not in the conventional sense. I wasn't carrying weapons or plotting violent revenge. My arsenal was far more subtle. Information, timing, and the art of being underestimated. That was the advantage I had. No one ever suspected the quiet girl who smiled too much, laughed too easily, and nodded at every demand could be a force to be reckoned with. It all started with the small things. Notes left carelessly on the boss's desk. Mistimed emails, confidential reports lost in plain sight. At first, they were little annoyances easily dismissed. But each tiny disruption was a thread in a larger web. A web I was weaving carefully, meticulously. Every glance I stole at their private conversations, every overheard remark at after-work gatherings, became a piece of the puzzle. And as the puzzle came together, I could see the cracks in their armor, the vulnerabilities no one else noticed. No one knew my past, not truly. They didn't know that I had once been betrayed in ways that left scars not visible on skin but embedded deep in memory. They didn't know that my heart had been used as a pawn, discarded when it was no longer convenient. That history didn't make me bitter. It made me smart, cunning, patient. I learned to mask my emotions, to hide my thoughts behind a perfectly painted smile. And now, at this office, my patience was paying off. The first real spark of my plan ignited on a Thursday afternoon. I was at my desk, casually scrolling through documents I accidentally received when I found it. A confidential email detailing bonuses, promotions, and a secret that could ruin the entire department if revealed. My pulse quickened, but I didn't let it show. I folded the information neatly in my mind, storing it for the perfect moment. Timing was everything. Strike too early and suspicion would fall on me. Wait too long and the opportunity would slip away. And then there was him, my boss. The man who had once made me believe in his charm, in his affection, in his loyalty. He didn't see me as a threat. He didn't see that every laugh I shared, every flirtatious glance I returned, was a calculated lure. He thought he controlled the game. He didn't even realize that the board had changed the moment I learned his secret. And now I had the pieces. And soon, very soon, I would play the move that would topple him completely. The thrill of anticipation was intoxicating. Each day, each interaction, each coincidental slip of information was a test, both for him and for me. And every time he smiled at me, leaned in to whisper something I wasn't meant to hear, I reminded myself, patience is power and I am patient. I knew the day was coming when everything would unravel. And when it did, the office that had once seemed bright and ordinary would become a stage for the perfect revenge. Crafted, patient, and unstoppable. The office was quieter than usual that Friday morning, the hum of computers and the murmur of voices carrying a false sense of calm. I watched him from across the room, my boss, unaware that every move he made was being catalogued, analyzed, and filed in my mind like evidence in a case. He had no idea that the charming smiles and small talks I offered weren't just harmless gestures. They were calculated distractions. I had spent weeks planting the seeds, Small acts that seemed innocent. Misfiled reports, accidental copy errors, harmless rumors subtly spread. And yet each one had chipped away at his carefully constructed image, slowly eroding the respect he thought he commanded. My coworkers remained oblivious, caught in the ordinary rhythm of office life, blind to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, a confidential meeting scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. The agenda was clear. Decisions about promotions, raises, and the allocation of a sensitive client account. I knew that if I timed it right, I could expose a hidden truth, one that would shake him professionally and personally. I reviewed my notes, the details of his mistakes, his manipulations, and the betrayal that had been carefully hidden from everyone. One slip, one revelation, and his facade would crumble. I sent a carefully worded email, anonymous, to a key executive in the company, hinting at discrepancies in his reports. Nothing overt, nothing accusatory, but enough to plant doubt. My pulse quickened as I imagined the ripple effect this message would create. Doubt, suspicion, scrutiny, tools I wielded with precision. And then, as he leaned back in his chair, reviewing his own documents, he smiled, oblivious. I bit back the smile, threatening to escape my lips. This was only the beginning. The trap had been set, but the outcome would not reveal itself immediately. I needed him to stumble, to falter, to show the cracks in his armor for everyone to see. And when he did, I would be waiting, patient as I always had been. I returned to my desk, outwardly calm, hiding the thrill of anticipation behind a neutral expression. Each passing minute drew me closer to the point of no return, the moment when my revenge would shift from subtle manipulation to undeniable exposure. And yet, beneath the surface, a question lingered, one I barely admitted even to myself. What if this backfires? What if the secrets I unleash consume me as well? But I pushed the doubt aside. There was no turning back now. Every smile, every friendly gesture, every whispered word had led to this. And soon, very soon, he would realize that the girl he underestimated was the one holding all the power. By Monday morning, the atmosphere in the office had shifted subtly, though no one seemed to notice outright. I watched him as he entered, his usual confident stride slightly off balance, a shadow of uncertainty flickering across his face. He tried to mask it, of course, but the subtle glance at his phone, the nervous tapping of his pen, these small betrayals thrilled me in ways I hadn't expected. My plan was working. I had made sure the anonymous email had reached the right people, and whispers of discrepancies began circulating through the higher ranks. He was careful, meticulous, yet unprepared for the quiet storm I had unleashed. I walked past him, pretending to focus on my own tasks, all the while noting the tension in his jaw, the forced calm in his voice when addressing colleagues. Each day, each interaction chipped away at his confidence like a sculptor carving away the excess to reveal the truth beneath. Then came the first real opportunity. A major client had requested a sudden, urgent meeting with him, and he was forced to scramble, juggling schedules and explanations. I offered to help, of course, and he welcomed it, oblivious that every action I took would later be used to expose his incompetence. I was careful, meticulous, like a spider weaving its web, knowing the moment of revelation had to be perfect. Late in the afternoon, I found the critical piece, a misfiled report, one he had overlooked in his rush. It was enough to raise serious questions, questions that could no longer be dismissed as oversight. I copied it carefully, crafting an anonymous note to accompany it, ensuring that his professional reputation would begin to wobble without a trace leading back to me. The thrill of control, of hidden power, surged through me, making my pulse race. Yet as I sat back at my desk, I couldn't ignore the faint, chilling thought that kept creeping into my mind. How far can I push this before it consumes me? I had spent months crafting every detail, every interaction, and yet the stakes were growing higher than I had anticipated. One wrong move could unravel everything, but the risk was part of the intoxicating allure. And just as I closed my laptop for the evening, I noticed him staring at me from across the office. Not angrily, not suspiciously, just studying. For a fraction of a second, our eyes met and a shiver ran down my spine. He didn't know what I knew, but perhaps in some instinctive way he was beginning to sense the danger lurking beneath the surface. This was the turning point. The first cracks had appeared in his armor, and soon, very soon, the office would see the storm that had been brewing quietly all along. And when it came, there would be no escaping it. The following week, The office buzzed with the kind of nervous energy only a hidden truth could inspire. I moved through it with calm precision, my eyes and mind constantly scanning, calculating, always 3 steps ahead. Every smile, every casual comment, every friendly gesture was now a weapon, a carefully placed piece in the puzzle that would bring him down. He tried to regain his composure, but the cracks were becoming impossible to hide. Whispers of his mistakes had reached the higher-ups, subtle hints that something was amiss, and he had no idea who was behind it. I kept my hands clean, my demeanor perfect. Innocent, approachable, the last person anyone would suspect. And that was exactly how it had to be. The opportunity came in the form of a high-stakes client presentation, one that could either elevate or completely destroy his standing. I volunteered to assist, taking control of the details he had neglected. Every slide I prepared, every point I highlighted, subtly emphasized his shortcomings without revealing my hand. He believed I was helping him recover while in reality I was tightening the noose. As the day of the presentation arrived, I watched from the sidelines as the room filled with important clients and executives. My heart pounded with anticipation, each passing second bringing me closer to the moment of revelation. I stayed poised, a silent conductor orchestrating the downfall with invisible strings. And then it happened, the first sign of panic. He stumbled over a key point, a question caught him off guard, and the room shifted in a subtle but undeniable way. Eyes darted between him and me, noticing his hesitations, the cracks I had carefully orchestrated now becoming visible to everyone. I kept my calm, my smile unwavering, knowing the perfect storm had begun. By the end of the meeting, the damage was done. He had lost credibility, and whispers of incompetence now had real weight. I walked away unnoticed, blending into the chaos of the office, yet inside, a fierce satisfaction burned bright. The trap I had set, invisible to everyone but me, had worked flawlessly. Yet as I returned to my desk, a sense of unease settled in. One unexpected glance from him, a lingering suspicion in his eyes, hinted that perhaps he was beginning to sense the depth of my plan. And I realized with a shiver that while the trap had succeeded, the real game, the part where the stakes were highest, was only just beginning. The office felt different that morning, charged, electric, as if the air itself knew the reckoning had arrived. I walked in deliberately slow, letting every glance, every whisper brush against me like the echoes of what was to come. Today was the day my careful patience and subtle manipulations would pay off fully. I had one last piece to play, something he could never anticipate. A carefully orchestrated chain of emails, documents, and accidental revelations had been sent to the executives over the past week. Every report, every forwarded memo, every hidden error I had documented would converge now, leaving him exposed. And I had positioned myself as the one who saved the situation, ensuring I remained untouchable. He sensed it too. I saw it in the way his hands shook slightly when he picked up his coffee, the almost imperceptible tension in his shoulders. He tried to act normal, to smile, to pretend, but the cracks were obvious to anyone paying attention. By the time the executives started asking pointed questions, the game was over. His defenses crumbled like fragile glass. I stayed calm, measured, a mask of innocent efficiency. When the final report landed on the table, detailing months of negligence and questionable decisions, the room went silent. I turned to him, then to me. And in that silence, I finally allowed myself a private, victorious smile. He looked at me, finally understanding, finally realizing that every move he thought unnoticed had been meticulously observed and documented. He tried to protest, to explain, to charm his way out, but it was useless. The evidence was undeniable. His reputation, his authority, everything he had built, was slipping through his fingers like sand. And I, Sage, the quiet one, the overlooked one, had orchestrated it all. My revenge was complete, not with violence, not with threats, but with precision, patience, and intellect. As he was escorted out of the office, head down, defeated, I felt a rush of liberation. I had taken back control of my life, my dignity, and my future. No more manipulation, no more hidden threats. I had won, not just for myself but for every subtle slight, every whispered insult, every unfair expectation that had been forced upon me. Yet even as I settled back into my chair, a strange sense of calm washed over me. Revenge was sweet, but freedom was sweeter. And in that quiet victory I realized something profound. The real power had never been in exposing him but in reclaiming myself. I leaned back, smiled, and finally let the weight of the past lift. Sage had survived, and this was only the beginning of her life on her own terms.